Welcome to the deep dive. Imagine this. A city paralyzed by disease, cholera actually. Fear is everywhere. And then picture someone already terrified seeing a monster. What happens when fear and honestly just plain old physics twist what we see? That's our focus today. We're diving into a really gripping story by Edgar Allan Poe. It features this terrifying living monster, but it tells us way more about our own minds than about any creature. Our mission to figure out how our feelings, our expectations can totally warp reality.
It really is a masterclass in psychological tension, isn't it? Poe sets it up brilliantly. New York, during the dread reign of the cholera, this wasn't some abstract threat. People were genuinely terrified. Death was everywhere. You can just feel the anxiety building.
Absolutely. And our narrator, he needs to escape this. So he takes up an offer from a relative who becomes the host character in the story to stay out in the country, this quiet cottage on the Hudson River. But, well, the bad news just keeps coming, even out there.
Right, that fear follows him. Poe writes that the palsying thought of death took entire possession of his soul. It's all he can think about, dream about, and he's completely consumed by it.
And his host is different. Described as having a less excitable temperament, more philosophical. He tries to kind of talk the narrator down, tries to bring some reason to the situation. He sees the danger but isn't terrified by, the idea of it in the same way.
But there's something else going on. The narrator, sort of secretly, has been reading these books from his host's library. Books that Poe says are designed to bring out any hereditary superstition lurking inside him.
So he's basically pouring fuel on the fire of his own anxiety.
Exactly. And that feeds right into this ongoing argument they have about omens, about superstitions. The narrator actually defends the idea, arguing that if lots of people believe something, even without obvious proof, there must be some truth to it. His host thinks that's just nonsense.
Okay, so we've got a guy steeped in fear, reading spooky books, believing in omens, and he's already agitated. The perfect setup, really, for something strange to happen, something that challenges everything. Let's get into that first sighting. So, a few days after he gets to the cottage, something happens that he describes as entirely inexplicable. It feels so significant, so portentous, that he immediately thinks this is an omen. It shakes him up so badly he doesn't even tell his friend for several days.
And that's key, isn't it? His mind is already working overtime with the cholera of fear, the books he's been reading, and now this unexplained event. It's like all the psychological ingredients are there for something really vivid to occur.
Right. So picture this. It's late afternoon, warm day. He's sitting by an open window, just looking out at this distant hill. It's bare because of a landslide. He's reading, but his mind keeps drifting back to the misery back in the city. Then he looks up, and he sees it. This object. He calls it some living monster of hideous conformation. It's moving incredibly fast down the hill and then vanishes into the woods.
And his first thought isn't just shock, it's like profound disbelief. He genuinely questions if he's sane. Poe says it took him many minutes to convince himself he wasn't dreaming or hallucinating, just trying to process this impossible thing.
And the description he gives, it's wild. He says it was far larger than any ship of the line in existence. I mean, think about a huge old warship, that big. He talks about this mouth at the end of a terrifying proboscis, like a trunk or snout 60 or 70 feet long, and as thick as an elephant's body.
Imagine trying to reconcile seeing that moving quickly down a hillside. It's no wonder he doubted his sanity. The mind under that kind of stress, fueled by fear, it can definitely project things, magnify them massively.
Oh, it gets weirder. He describes this huge amount of black, shaggy hair near the base of the trunk, like enough for a score of buffaloes, and sticking out of the hair. 2 gleaming tusks, like a boar's, but, gigantic.
And then these staffs.
Yeah. Gigantic staffs, 30 or 40 feet long, apparently made of pure crystal, like prisms reflecting the sunlight. They stick out forward, parallel to the snout.
The level of detail is just astonishing. It's not some vague blob. It's this intricate, fully formed nightmare. It really shows how creative a terrified mind can be.
Then the body, fashioned like a wedge, with 2 pairs of wings. Each wing, he says, is nearly 100 yards in length. And get this, they're covered in metal scales, each scale 10 or 12 feet wide. The top and bottom wings are even connected by a strong chain.
A chain. It's fantastical, almost mechanical in its description.
But the detail that really gets him, the chief peculiarity, is this image of a skull, a death's head, covering almost the entire chest of the creature, white, glaring against the dark body. Seeing that, combined with everything else, He's just overwhelmed by horror and this sense of impending doom.
Yeah, the sound.
Right. He says the huge jaws open and make this sound so loud and expressive of woe that it physically affects him like a nail on his nerves. And as the creature finally disappears, he just collapses, faints right there on the floor.
Wow. It's an incredibly vivid, terrifying account. But like you said, the real question Poe poses is, how could something seem so real, so detailed, and yet be so completely wrong? That's where the story shifts, moving from horror into something more philosophical.
It really does. So the narrator is deeply shaken by this. It takes him, 3 or 4 days before he can finally bring himself to tell his friend, the host. And the timing is perfect. They're back in the same room, sitting near the same window where he saw it.
You can just imagine the host's reaction. Poe says at first he laughed heartily. Probably thought it was just nerves, you know?
Yeah, but then he sees how genuinely distressed the narrator is, and he gets really serious. He starts to worry, thinking maybe his friend is actually losing his mind, that his insanity was a thing beyond suspicion.
And right at that moment, that incredibly tense moment,
He sees it again. The narrator spots the monster outside the window and points, just filled with absolute terror.
but the host really looks carefully as the narrator describes where it is. Nothing. He maintained that he saw nothing.
Which, understandably, just sends the narrator spiraling. He's convinced now. It's either an omen he's going to die, or worse, it's the start of madness. He covers his face, totally distraught.
But here's the fascinating pivot. When the narrator looks up again, the creature's gone.
Yeah.
And the host, he's not panicking anymore. He's regained his composure, his calmness. And then he starts asking questions.
Right. He questions the narrator very rigorously about exactly what the creature looked like, all those details. And after hearing the description again, the host seems relieved, like a weight has been lifted. Why the sudden shift?
That's the brilliant part. Instead of, calling for help, the host changes tack completely. He starts talking about speculative philosophy, specifically about what he sees as the main reason people make mistakes in, any kind of investigation.
And it's not just random philosophizing, is it? It's directly related.
Exactly. He says the biggest error comes from our liability to underrate or to overvalue the importance of an object through mere mismeasurement of its propinquity. That's a mouthful, but basically...
Like propinquity meaning closeness, right?
Right. Physical closeness, or even closeness in time or relevance. He's saying we misjudge how important or big something really is because we don't properly account for how near or far away it is from us.
He gives that example about democracy, doesn't he? Saying that when people estimate its influence, they often forget to factor in how far off in the future its full effect might be. They focus on the immediate and distort the bigger picture.
Precisely. It's this idea that our perception of size, scale, importance, it's all warped by distance, by proximity, and crucially, Poe implies, by our emotional state while we're perceiving it. Fear, expectation. They change how we marry that propinquity.
So the host is laying this intellectual groundwork. He's basically giving the narrator the key to understanding what happened, even before the big reveal. What happens next is just masterful.
It really is. The host pauses his explanation, walks over to a bookcase, and pulls out what Poe calls an ordinary synopsis of natural history. Just a basic science book.
And then he does this little thing. He asks to swap chairs. Says he needs to sit where the narrator was sitting, by the window, so he can the better distinguish the fine print. A tiny detail, but absolutely critical.
Yeah, that seat swap is everything. He puts himself in the exact physical position where the narrator experienced the visions.
So he sits down in the narrator's chair, opens the book, and says something like, if you hadn't described that monster in such amazing detail, I might never have figured this out. And then he starts reading.
Not about some mythical beast, though.
No, he reads a schoolboy account, Poe calls it, of the genus Sphinx, a type of moth, part of the order Lepidoptera, insects.
And listen to how the book describes it. 4 membranous wings, covered with little colored scales of metallic appearance. Remember the narrator's metal scales.
Exactly. And the mouth, a ruled proboscis produced by an elongation of the jaws. That sounds a lot like the narrator's terrifying trunk. It even mentions tiny jaws, rudiments of mandibles, and downy palpi, little feelers on the sides.
The description continues, the lower wings attached to the upper ones by a stiff hair, antennae shaped like clubs, a pointed, prismatic abdomen. It's lining up point by point with the monster.
And then the kicker. The book specifically mentions the death's-headed Sphinx. It says, this particular moth has occasioned much terror among the vulgar at times by the melancholy kind of cry which had utters, and the insignia of death which it wears upon its corset. That skull marking?
It's uncanny. The death's head, the cry, which is probably some kind of stridulation or noise.
Hmm.
The moth makes the metallic wings, the proboscis, the shape.
Yeah.
It's all there, just, insect-sized.
So the host finishes reading, closes the book, leans forward, making sure he's in the exact spot the narrator was, and then he says, here it is.
He sees it too.
Yeah, he says, it is reascending the face of the hill and a very remarkable-looking creature I admitted to be still. And then he delivers the punchline.
The grand reveal.
It is by no means so large or so distant as you imagined it, he tells the narrator. For the fact is that as it wriggles its way up this thread which some spider has wrought along the window sash, I find it to be about the 16th of an inch in its extreme length.
A 16th of an inch.
And also about the 16th of an inch distant from the pupil of my eye.
Wow. So the whole time, this terrifying, gigantic monster was a tiny moth, literally inches, fractions of an inch from his eyeball, crawling on a spider web on the window pane.
Exactly. That mismeasurement of propinquity wasn't just philosophical, it was literal physical distance. The extreme closeness to his eye, combined with his intense fear, his superstitious mindset, it completely distorted the scale.
And all those terrifying details, the death's head mark, the cry, the metallic-looking wings, the proboscis, they were real features of the moth. But his mind, primed by terror, just blew them up to monstrous proportions, created a horrifying reality out of something tiny and harmless.
It's such a brilliant illustration. This story, it's not really about the moth, is it? It's a deep dive into us, into how our internal world, our fears, biases, expectations, and even just simple perspective can fundamentally change what we perceive as real.
Yeah, the narrator's fear of cholera, those books he read, the sheer closeness of the insect. It all converged to create this massive illusion.
And that really makes you think, doesn't it? For you, listening right now, how often do we do that? How often do we mismeasure propinquity in our own lives?
Right. How often do our immediate fears, or maybe just the sheer closeness of some problem or piece of news, make us blow its importance way out of proportion? Or maybe ignore something huge because it feels far away.
It's a powerful reminder. The story shows that sometimes the scariest monsters aren't hiding out there in the dark woods. Sometimes they're right here, on our own windowsills, just magnified and twisted by the lens of our own minds.
So maybe take a closer look. What monsters might you be seeing today that, well, just need a shift in perspective?
Indeed. A really fascinating lesson from Poe. That's all for this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
See you next time.